Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. Today, we have a truly eye-opening conversation with Daniel Trevor, author of The Unholy Trinity: How Carbs, Sugar, and Industrial Oils Make Us Fat, Sick, and Addicted, and How to Escape Their Grip. Daniel isn't just another author. He's a survivor, a citizen scientist, which we will get into what that is, and someone who turned his own health crisis into a mission to uncover the hidden truths behind modern nutrition. In this episode, we'll explore how everyday foods may be sabotaging our bodies, the science behind metabolic dysfunction, and what practical steps you can take to reclaim your health. If you've ever felt confused by conflicting nutrition advice or overwhelmed by health data, this conversation is your roadmap to clarity. So, welcome, Daniel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love what you're doing too. It's
Oh,
just,
thank you.
yeah, anything to
Thank you.
help people to get them on the right track
I
of,
agree.
how we've been lied to for the last 70 years of what we're supposed to eat.
I agree. And so when people come on, I am just always so interested in them personally to find out there had to be something to get you to where you and I are sitting in the seat right now, whether it was a light bulb moment or a dimmer switch, is how I always describe it in the beginning. If there was some big revelatory op opportunity that came along in your life, or if you want to let people know a little bit more about you and how you got into this field. And if you want to also touch on that citizen scientist, it took me a minute. I'd never heard that phrase before, but it came up several times with you, and I learned something new. And so I thought that might be something that our audience would be interested in knowing about as well.
Sure. Yeah, well, what happened to me was what spawned the book was I had passed a cardiac stress test with flying colors, got a glowing bill of health from my trusted physicians. And then I had a heart attack and almost died. It's like, what? And I thought I was Mr. Healthy. I was a slim, symptom-free Mr. Healthy. So, and they missed four comorbidities that I had, which I'll tell you about, due to inadequate or what I call conventional blood testing, because they don't know the right tests. And I'm not going to be beating up on the doctors too much because doctors have saved my life, but it's they're miseducated in certain areas, which we'll go into. But so thank me for not dying and researching everything in the book and ringing the alarm bells to warn others. Look, don't be like me. Find out what's going on inside your body
Yeah,
with the proper testing kind of thing.
yeah.
And yeah, so that's what led me to write the book. I mean, I didn't set out to write a book, but after I had the heart attack, I've studied technical data throughout my life and I know how to analyze data, right? I'm not intimidated by anything. And so I was really very interested. And so I was doing all this research. I went to Google University and YouTube University and PubMed and all these studies and books. And I immersed myself there. And and then I started chronicling all the research that I was getting, and a lot of it just blew my mind. It was like it
Mm-hmm.
shocked me and it infuriated me too, because like I said, what we've been told to eat for 7 years is killing us. It's just all backwards. And I
Hmm.
don't know if that's purposeful or what, but there's a lot of money involved. Well, I'm not going to get there right
Follow
now.
the money. Follow the
I'm
money.
telling you, it really is something. And I think of the book as three things, basically. First of all, it's a how-to on how I personally researched and then stabilized and reversed four comorbidities. And it's also an expose on big food, big pharma, and big medicine. And it's also what you would call a data evaluation and analysis of this. In 1930, the obesity rate in the United States was 1%. We are now approaching 50% in under a mere 100 years. Never in human history has a population gotten so fat and so sick so fast. You got to
Fast.
say,
Yeah, right. So fast.
what the hell is happening, right? And when you pull the strings and you do the data analysis, you find out that it's the introduction in the 20th century of the refined carbs, sugar, and seed oils in the amounts and concentrations we've never seen. It's just shocking. And so all these so-called foods, air quotes, they're not they're genetically opposed to what we're used to eating
Right.
ancestrally for hundreds of thousands, millions of years, right?
Well put. Well
Yeah.
put. Do you want to talk about seed oils and why they've been labeled bad? People hear that phrase a lot. I don't know if you want to go into that a little
Yeah,
bit.
sure. I can go into all of them. It's just, well, the seed oils, see, they never existed prior to the late 1800s, right? Um, the first one was cottonseed oil, and then the other, then you have safflower, sunflower, canola, soybean, that kind of thing. And in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were used as machinery lubricant and motor oil in the Industrial Revolution. Right? And it was just wow, they were considered a toxic waste. But there was these two guys from Europe came to, was it Cincinnati, Ohio, William Proctor and James Gamble, also known as Procter and Gamble.
Uh-huh.
And they looked at a bucket of it and said, hey, it looks like tallow or lard, like what people would cook with, right? Hey, why don't we sell it, make some money? And so they had this new product that they came up with. It was called Crisco,
Yeah.
and it started flying off the shelves in
Hmm.
1911, right? And then we find out 90 years later that Crisco contains more trans fats than any other food you can put in your mouth, and that's the worst kind of fat that you can eat. But we didn't find that out until the 1990s, right? And wouldn't you know it, even though it started flying off the shelves in 1911, in 1912 was the very first medically recorded heart attack. Is that a coinky dink or what? Right? And then cancer wasn't even like a thing, as they say, until the 30s. And, it's just, and then, by the late 40s, it just, heart disease was the biggest killer and that kind of thing. But that's a whole other story insofar as, see, what happened is in 1955, President Eisenhower had a heart attack. And it was a big deal because people were dropping in the time of their lives all over the country. And they discovered years later that it was because of the smoking. Smoking was an epidemic back then, right? Everybody smoked. You smoked in
Right.
planes and restaurants.
Right.
Doctors smoked around their patients, right?
Right. Right.
And there is a thing, see, smoking, what they found later on after they discovered this thing called electron microscopy, where they could snake these teeny tiny cameras up into the arteries and see what's going on. I won't get too sciencey on you or your audience, but they discovered this thing called the glycocalyx. What is that? The glycocalyx is this fuzzy lining of the arteries, of the endothelium, the artery wall. And what it does, it acts as the first line of protection against what's called small, dense LDL particles. Now, those are the bad boy that can invade the artery wall and get stuck underneath, and they build up this plaque, this soft, vulnerable plaque over time. And it causes heart attacks and strokes because some future stress point, whether it's a physical stress, emotional stress, or both, it ruptures through the lining of the arteries and it spills into where the lumen is, where the blood flows. It touches blood, creates a clot, goes downstream, so to speak. If it goes to your heart, you have a heart attack. If it goes to your brain, you have a stroke. It's pretty wild, which tells you it's systemic. These soft, inflamed, vulnerable plaques are throughout your body. It's not just in the heart or in the neck here, but they're all over the place. So they found this out that smoking destroys this glycocalyx, which leads all. I have a picture of that in the book because in the book I have a lot of graphs and images and um, you know charts and pictures because I want to make it easier for the reader to understand what's going on. So that was a big deal. And what happened was there was this crazy researcher, very unethical, named Ansel Keys, and he came along at that period of time in the 50s, and he had this theory called the diet heart hypothesis. And he said it was the meat and the butter and the cheese, it was clogging up the arteries and that kind of thing. And it's not that way at all. He gave this analogy, which people glommed onto, that it was like, a shower drain with the soap and the grease and the hair, and it all gets, it's not that way at all. But anyway, so he was very popular and he started this, within, I don't know, by the early 60s, big food started coming up with all this low fat, non-fat nonsense. And ever since, and they added more sugar and carbohydrates. And then you see, if you look at a graph, which I have in the book, you see, dietary guidelines and all this was down here, and this is where the obesity rate wound up, right?
Right.
And
Hmm.
so, so it's the carbs, the grain carbs, the sugars, and the seed oils. And the seed oils, see, they have these chemicals in it. There's TBHQ, there's HNE, which is 4-hydroxynonenal, and others that go on. And these chemicals are carcinogenic, neurodegenerative, and 7 to 10 times more likely to cause heart disease. It's just awful. And people are adding these things all the time. And I have a whole chapter on this called The Shocking Truth About Vegetable Oils. And I
Yeah.
have all the data there because look, none of this is my opinion because I know in the beginning, I would think, I thought, and I even tell the reader in the beginning of the book, I said, I know you're probably thinking, oh, he's not a doctor. Why should I trust you? Right? And I say, look, none of this is Daniel's opinion. I say, just think of me as a friendly relay point of what the best of 21st century science has to offer for your health and wellness and fix yourself. I
Hmm.
did. You can too.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, that's amazing that you took this heart attack and literally, well, you were already healthy, you were saying. So what did you do differently?
Well, it's funny. I was on with Ken Berry and he says, hey, Daniel, so what was your diet like before you had the heart attack? Were you sitting on the sofa eating Cheetos and Coca-Cola? And I said, well, no, Dr. Ken, I wasn't. I knew enough to not do that. What,
Or
what
not
I would
admit it to him?
exactly. Well, look, I'm just an open book. I just tell you what I went through and don't do what I went through to lead to all that. But I was totally sold on the propaganda and the BS of heart healthy whole grains. I didn't know that these heart healthy whole grains, they turn into sugar when you put them in your body.
Hmm.
I didn't know that wheat raises the blood sugar higher than a Snickers candy bar. It's like there were so
Hmm.
many things in my research that when I found out, it just really blew my mind. And then at some point I thought, I need to share this with my fellow humans to make them aware of what I didn't know. And most people, because most of us, I was just like everybody else. I got my health news from, I don't know, some headline or something online or that kind of
And
thing.
you just believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so and so saying it. So, and
Yeah.
hey, the box of Cheerios says heart healthy on it,
I
approved by the American
know.
Heart
I
Association.
know.
And
I
it's just,
know.
oh my God. So it's just pretty wild that way. And so, yeah, I had to stop all that, because in the morning I'd have this big bowl of granola that had to have 60 or 70 grams of carbohydrates right there. And also with some high fructose corn syrup, which is
Yeah.
very deadly. And that's
Hmm.
led to one of my comorbidities. But yeah, these seed oils are just so, they're in all the restaurants and they cause hyperphagia, which is, you want to eat more. Hyper too much, phagia means to eat. And
Hmm.
all these really negative things that to the body, and that we just need to avoid. Now there are some oils you can use with true, authentic olive oil, but you have to watch out with that because about 80% they're saying is adulterated. In other words, what they'll do is
Mm.
these corrupt manufacturers, they'll put in a little bit of olive oil, and then the other 80% they'll fill it up with some cheap canola oil or whatever,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And so you have to watch out for that. So you never want to get any bargain basement vegetable oils if you're going to, so you got to watch out for the olive oil. And, there's other ones like if you're going to use them for cooking, like avocado oil, coconut oil, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But
So
yeah,
did you do a big change to your diet then? Is that
oh
what
yeah.
you feel like? Okay.
Yeah,
And go
what I
ahead.
did, yeah, on YouTube University, when I went there, I found all these brilliant doctors and, that were on the cutting edge of modern medical science and what's really good for human beings. And it made so much sense to me. I found, people like Dr. Eric Berg and David Perlmutter and all these, like I said, biological geniuses on the cutting edge of modern medical
Hmm.
science and all the results. And it made so much sense. And I found this one guy named Dr. Ford Brewer, and he had spent decades teaching thousands of doctors over many years at Johns Hopkins, right? And his videos used to be really complicated, but again, I'm used to If I don't understand a word or a terminology, a term from something, that I just look it up. I just find out because I don't want to be stopped. Because, like they say, if you don't know the notes, you can't whistle the tune, right? So at some point when I was writing and everything, I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, Dr. Ford, I'm writing this book. Would you write a chapter in my book that delineates what are the most important blood labs and scans that anyone could get online these days without needing a doctor's prescription? That way, the person themselves can find out what's going on inside them, whether they got something lurking, ready to pounce, or they're somewhere in between, or they're normal." And that way, and so he agreed. And so he wrote my chapter 22. What is it? He calls it Don't Guess, Test, because it's important because these days, as you know, all these diseases of modernity are silent. Most of them
Mhm.
have no symptoms. I mean, check out
Mhm.
this stat page. 60% of the people who die from a very first heart attack, the very first symptom of even having heart disease was their own death. It's like, oh my God. So you can't,
That's that's a bummer.
it's just, oh my
That
God. And I try to explain to people to get, people that I know, and I don't push it on them or anything, but I say, I, uh, I think you should get some tests because I'm looking at them. These days, I just look at somebody and they're overweight or obese and then they're right away type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, like a fatty liver disease, kidneys are off. I mean, I just go down the list in my head because I've gotten so familiar with reading the bodies and so forth. And
yeah.
I'll say, think about getting some tests because, they're really important. And they'll smile and say something, uh, okay, yeah, but I'm not sick. I say, well, I wasn't sick either. Look what happened to me, right? And then I discovered with all the testing that I got and what that I found out from Dr. Ford Brewer, I another comorbidity that I had was fatty liver disease. I had NAFLD, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Because I don't drink, no drugs. I'm already silly enough, as my daughters will surely attest. And so I got that from eating too much high fructose corn syrup because that's what does it. You get too much high fructose corn syrup, it's worse than sugar. You get that in your body, and that it starts to see none of the cells in the body can metabolize HFCS. So it all goes to your liver and it stores up fatty there, and that's how that goes. So that was one of my other comorbidities. And the more I looked at it, it was just, see, another guy I found on YouTube was this guy named no, he was Ivor Cummins. And he had the same thing with this fatty liver. He had this, what's called elevated GGT. It's a liver enzyme, gamma
Hmm.
glutamyl transferase. This is very important. See, most doctors, when they run your labs, they'll do ALT, ASP, ALT. These are the liver enzymes, and they'll leave out the GGT, the gamma glutamyl transferase, which is the most important one. And why is that? Life insurance companies, you see, they got to know who to accept, who to reject, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And it's all bottom line to them. It's all for profits, and they're damn good at analyzing
Follow the money.
statistics and data, right?
Hmm.
And I think they're probably the most important, biggest, smartest companies on the planet. Because they started insuring boats when we go out in the 1600s and that kind of thing. Anyway, they're damn good at figuring out what's going to happen. So they found out that the number one cause of number one marker of all cause mortality is having this elevated GGT, gamma glutamyl
Mm.
transferase. And I'm thinking, well, why don't the doctors and the insurance companies talk to each other? Because the doctors don't seem to know. It's just wild.
Makes no sense.
Exactly. And then another study I found was they said if you have this elevated GGT, um, the usual cause of death is not liver cancer or anything. Usual cause of death is a heart attack. It's like, oh my God. So I started connecting all these dots and it was pretty wild. So that was another comorbidity that I had.
What was the biggest change that you made that you think made the biggest impact on your health? Or in other words, when you see people, like you said, you notice people and you can already dial in that their health is not where it should be. What would be the first thing that you would tell people to do? Maybe that was very affected with you after your heart attack that made the biggest health change.
Okay, well, two parts to that answer. First one is I tell people, first of all, if they are going to have my book, to make sure they really understand the first 5 or 6 pages, because there I get into, starting on page 2 of chapter 1, you have to understand the two most important players in the processing of the food that you put in your mouth. Number one is glucose, which also known as blood sugar, and the other one is insulin. You eat something and your glucose goes up. The pancreas senses that and it secretes an insulin to bring it down, keep it in a safe range, and that's a normal process that goes on through life. But if you're eating things that are not compatible with proper human nutrition, right, like we have been in this last century or so, or too frequently, or both, then your glucose is going to be elevated, your insulin is going to be elevated hour after hour, day after day, and within a very, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you're going to have what's hyperinsulinemia or insulin resistance. And hyperinsulinemia is just a medical term. Hyper, too much, insulin. Emia means in the blood. Too much insulin in the blood, hyperinsulinemia. And you're coming up on prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. So you got to understand that. And that's why people are very well advised to get a continuous glucose monitor, CGM,
Mm-hmm.
to find out exactly what are these foods doing to me, right? And what exactly?
Mm-hmm.
So your little bell can go off on your phone because you hook it up, you wear it back here, and you hook it up to your phone, and the bell goes off after you've eaten, let's say 90 minutes out from your last, and you got to look back. Okay, so what is the carbohydrate or sugar that was in that meal? I need to either reduce the portion or eliminate it totally. You have to understand that kind of thing. Now, for me, the hardest thing for me to do when I made the transition, when I found keto, because that's our ancestral native state.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't have, you know, bread, pasta, cereal, crackers, biscuits,
Lucky
waffles,
Charms.
pancakes, Lucky Charm. Oh yeah, there's the exactly
It's
couch
anything
shop.
but lucky.
Exactly, yeah. So we didn't have any of that, and let alone the candy cake ice cream. But the hardest thing for me and for most people is total wheat and grain elimination. And I tell people, it was difficult for me. Like I'm just like the regular person. Just take it step by step. You're going for
Mm-hmm.
progress, not perfection.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I tell people, I say, look, write down your short list, long list, whatever long it is, of what you can't live without. What is it that I can't not bring into the house, right? And take the top five, and then what your task is to find delicious but healthy substitutes for those
Uh,
things, whether it's pizza, granola, this or that, because there are ways that you can continue to eat something like that, which is still delicious for you, but not be as dangerous. So you do that, and then after a few weeks, a month, your taste buds and palate will change. You know this.
yep.
Taste buds and
Mm-hmm.
palate will change. And once I achieved complete wheat and grain elimination, wow, I was fantastic. First of all, number one, the better I felt. Number two, the better my blood labs looked. What more can anybody ask for? I feel
Mm-hmm.
better, and it's proven by my blood labs. So
Mm-hmm.
like that was what it was for me.
Do you have any recipe that you recreated that was one of your favorites that you turned into a healthy
Well, yeah,
dish?
well, I'm like everybody else. I just love pizza, especially if
Uh-huh.
you're watching
I knew
cable
you were going to
TV.
say that.
Yeah, you see the commercial and you see the cheese is being stretched out and they're taking the slice out. And before you know it, you're calling Domino's or something to
Again,
right?
follow the money. That stretchy cheese is there's dollar signs floating around in the background, right?
Exactly. And then the next commercial is for a pharma drug. Hey, ask your doctor about, whatever it is that they're selling. And so, and
Yeah.
then and then they start going off on all the side effects. It's like, what? So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, like I said, it's just
You,
such a shame that they're all tied in like that.
so do you have a famous pizza recipe
Well, I
that you
went
do?
on YouTube is a treasure trove of
Mm-hmm.
keto recipes, all kinds of really low, that are delicious. And
Mm-hmm.
I was hooked on the pizza, and so I found this one that was instead of making it with grains, you can make it with almond flour.
Mm-hmm.
And then I eventually lost the taste for that too and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I found a granola that I liked, and everything was. Because me, I was just following the headlines. Low fat, American Heart Association says this, and they know, right? Because it even says so on the box or the bottle.
Hmm.
And it's so sad because like I said, there's just so much corruption. See, big food in there, they have these chemical and biochemical geniuses in their conference rooms and labs around the world that are figuring out, okay, so what can we put into these products that we're selling that will make them eat the whole bag instead of half the
That's
bag?
right.
Put 3 bags in the shopping cart instead of two, because you know how
Hmm.
Uncle Joe goes through it or whatever. And
Hmm.
so, there's that, and it's just such a shame because we see what. Let me tell you about the wheat too and the grains. See, in the late 70s and early 80s, Big Ag came along and they wanted to figure out how do we get more of a bountiful crop? How do we get more out of it? So they came up with this thing called chemical mutagenesis and radiation mutagenesis. And what that does is it amps up this chemical called gliadin, Gliadin, gliadin. And what does that do? Well, it attaches to the opiate receptors in your brain. Now, it doesn't relieve pain or, get you high or anything, but what its expression is to make you crave more of the things that have wheat and grains in them, like the bread, the pasta, the cereal, the pancakes, the waffles, the tortillas, the pizza crust.
Potato chips.
Exactly. And check out this stat page. This is amazing. The average supermarket has 60,000 products, give or take, right?
Oh my gosh.
59,000 of them have wheat or some form of wheat. I
Oh,
cover
get
this.
out of here.
No, really. It's even Twizzlers, the candy, the second ingredient is wheat. It's like they are really coming after our opiate receptors, and people they're not reading the labels. They don't know. And so I cover that in my chapter 10, Are You a Wheat Addict?
Yeah.
Because it's if you don't know these things, you're just going to get hooked and you're just going to be, and because you and I, when we go into the supermarket, we don't think this out loud or even say it. We just assume that everything that is for sale is going to be, none of it's going to be bad for me, right? Because it wouldn't be for sale, because then
That's right.
attorneys get involved.
Uh,
So, but anyway,
No, that's a very big point, especially for our audience that are recovering from ultra processed food use disorder. So we're here to help people move away from sugar and processed food.
I had
And
that.
yeah, and so all of this ties back into what we do about, look, if you could have a little single serving of Doritos, rock on. But the problem is what you've brought up about these are immoderatable foods, and a bag of potato chips might say 12 or 16 servings. Well, I'm no quitter. I could easily down that in, a couple of sittings, and they're calling it 12 to 16, which is laughable because you can't moderate as you pointed out, the scientists that have been hired to create food to the highest bliss point for a reason. Again, follow the money because, yeah, they might put a serving on there which is small, but ain't nobody gonna have a small serving of potato chips or Captain Crunch or whatever because it's so ironic because they create it to eat more, but yet they put these smaller serving portions on the ingredients, and that's just not possible. Do you want to talk about how these foods trigger these addictive like cravings and why we should,
Sure,
in
I can
my
just mention.
opinion, avoid it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's very accurate that they came up with this saying that you can't eat just one,
Yeah,
right?
they ain't kidding.
Well, here's the thing. In the mid 80s, smoking was going down and the big tobacco was just, they were losing their profits. And because people were listening to the Surgeon General warnings about this cancer and all that kind of thing. So big tobacco bought up the big food companies. They bought Kraft, Nabisco, General Foods, and so on. And they brought their addiction scientists from big tobacco over to the big food companies. And these are not scientists to get you unaddicted from something, right? They are, again, how do we get them to eat more of it? Uh, it's more for the bottom lines and profit, right? As opposed to what's good for human beings. because
Hmm.
it's just, the way it is that people are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and we're treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. It's just all backwards. And, we're all on our own. You may know of cardiologist Dr. William Davis. He's had a number of really great bestsellers. His latest one, I think, was Super Gut, which is a great book about how you get your gut together. And I cover a lot of that in my chapter 23, Maximizing Gut Health, and how to make this Lactobacillus reuteri yogurt, which just, everybody's deficient in that ever since if you've taken any kind of antibiotics, it just wipes it out. So you got to get all that back again. But anyway, yeah. So these things, we went from, see, the A1C that you have in your blood starts to go up, right? And from eating all the foods that you're talking about, the carbs, the sugar, and the oils, and so forth. And they discovered in this one study that the higher your A1C, the faster your brain shrinks on an annual basis. And that's what's contributing to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and cognitive dysfunction, that kind of thing. So it really is all over the place. You can't escape it, because you're so right in calling that out, because it's everywhere, and we've all become addicted to it. And again, you just have to do it. We've all been fooled. It's just, it's like that quote from, was it Mark Twain? He was this common sense philosopher from the 1800s, and he said, what was it? It's easier to fool people than to convince them they have been fooled. It's
Ah.
easier to fool people than to convince them, hey, pal, you've been fooled. Right?
Hmm.
So once they buy into a certain idea, hey, that's how it is. And like that.
It's really tough when we help people to get off these ultra processed foods because they literally are so addicted. It's that same part of the brain where you're addicted to anything, drugs, alcohol, shopping, porn, uh, TV, anything, smoking, all of that is housed in the same center, and the brain doesn't care how it gets its fix. It wants to feed off dopamine. So,
Yes.
food, unfortunately, is the lowest hanging fruit. And because you've got to eat, that's one of those addictions that is unfortunately, you still got to do it in order to live. And we live in a society where we're surrounded by it all the time. I mean, you can't drive down the street without 10 fast food opportunities. I mean, even going to buy dog food, there's candy bars at the checkout counter at the
Oh,
pet store. So that is such a fight for people. And then whenever we start to make changes, we've got a brain who's scanning the room to always be safe, and it gets uncomfortable with these big changes. And then it tries to self sabotage you to keep you in a familiar hell versus an unfamiliar heaven. And so we've got a lot of issues to fight against here. And you just start thinking, where do I even start with people?
yeah, it's rough. I think if they get the information first, because, there's no, like I said before, a lot of us just got our health information from a headline or from the news, or this week coffee's bad for you, the next week coffee's good for you. And it's like, you know, so there's nowhere that people get that the doctors don't know. I mean, the doctors are misinformed in their pharma-funded medical schools,
Hmm.
pharma-funded medical schools. I'll repeat that. And,
Maybe they should have gone to the school you went to.
oh my God. Well, I'm telling you, they just don't see, Big Pharma doesn't want them talking to the patients about
Right.
nutrition. They don't know anything about it anyway. They want these doctors with a prescription pad in one hand and a scalpel or a tongue depressor in the other, or whatever. And so it's drugs and procedures, and more drugs and more procedures. It's not ever, okay, so why is this guy so overweight and he's got this A1C that's out the roof? And what's the root cause of this? But no, they're just
Right.
going to prescribe, metformin or Jardiance or
Hmm.
something like that. And it's just like that. It's so sad. They don't get any of the information. That's why I'm so glad to see RFK Jr. pushing for the medical schools to start teaching nutrition to doctors. Because these doctors, I mean, look, I don't want to beat up on doctors. They're already overwhelmed. They work for bosses and they're in certain systems and they get 7 to 10 minutes to a patient and then they got to do all this computer entry and and by the time they're 30 or 40, they got a family and they got a mortgage and they're stuck, right? I should tell you about this ischemia trial. You know about the ischemia
Okay.
trial?
I don't, but I'm about to learn.
Well, I'll tell you the reason why it's so important is because, see, heart disease, as you know, is the biggest killer of humans. It's just unbelievable. And so there was this big trial called the ischemia trial. It was a $100 million large government funded um, trial. And it was almost 5,200 patients. Well, obviously 5,179. I don't know why these things stick in my head. But anyway, so two groups. Group one, they gave them invasive procedures. One was either CABG, CABG, which stands for coronary artery bypass graft, that's open heart surgery
Mm-hmm.
bypass, or PCI, percutaneous coronary intervention. That's one or more stents. So they either got open heart bypass surgery or stents. The other group, they sent them in the direction of lifestyle. You know, stop eating the Cheetos, get back to the gym, lose 30 pounds, all that kind of thing, right? And they followed them closely for 4 years. And at the end of the period, the whole trial, it was a failure. See, what they wanted to prove was that these invasive procedures, they were the way to go because there's so much of an enormous amount of revenue in tied up. There's no
Right.
money in diet
Follow
and
the money.
nutrition and going to the
That's
gym.
right.
There's no money in that. And they even said in the conclusion, the ischemia trial failed to demonstrate that these invasive procedures are any good at preventing heart attacks and strokes. Is that now? They can be life-saving interventions in certain situations. A person's having a heart attack or there's some emergency in
Right.
the hospital, but that's only 15% of the time. The other 85% of the time, all these invasive procedures, are done for prevention. And these studies, this one, Orbita trial, Courage trial, they proved that they don't work for prevention. And you would think that these operations would either stop or I mean slow down, or the graph is out the roof. It's just more done being now than ever. And because there's such so I asked the reader in the book, I said, you think they would slow down? But there's such an enormous amount of revenue involved. There's no way the CEO and the board of directors of the hospital is going to want to see all that disappear, because if that disappears, all that money, there goes the there's no, I mean, the amount of loss of careers and institutions would just go up in smoke, because there goes the beach house and the mountain retreat and the kids in Ivy League, and it would just all disappear. All that's fancy Mercedes down to a Kia or whatever. Nothing wrong with Kia, but you see what I'm talking about. So I tell the reader, I said, look, if your doctor is suggesting that you do one of these invasive procedures, show him these studies, then he'll know that you know. And then you can ask him again, okay, explain to me again why you think I should do this.
Yeah.
Because, it's sad to say. And I'm not saying everybody's doctor's like that, but it's just too prevalent.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask you is, so what's the solution to that?
Hey, we're on our own. You and me, Paige, we're on our own. If we can open the eyeballs of some of our followers and people that, we got to let them know. There's a great quote from cardiologist, I've mentioned him before, Dr. William Davis. One of his
Mm-hmm.
books about 8 years ago was called Undoctored, subtitle,
Mm-hmm.
Why Healthcare Has Failed You and How You Can Become Smarter Than Your Doctor. Why
Mm-hmm.
healthcare has failed you and how because he spent decades in the medical industrial complex, right? And he has a quote there that I stole. I give him the proper attribution. I put it in the first in the introduction, and he says something like, "Hamburger contains no ham. There are no grapes or nuts in grape nuts, and health does not come from healthcare." It's like, oh my God, that's perfect. So anyway, we are on our own
Mm-hmm. I
because
agree.
we're surrounded by big food, which makes these, if you want to call them foods, food like substances maybe, and then which sends us to big medicine. And then big medicine winds up sending us to big pharma, and around we go.
Yeah, I like that saying that no one's coming to save you. And I always tell people that you have got to educate yourself on whatever health issue you're having. You've got to educate yourself. And so when you go into your doctor, you need to have intelligent questions to ask. And I think that also will make them pay attention. If you're someone who seems like you know what's going on, you're less likely to be brushed by the side if you have the right questions to ask. But you do have to understand the right questions to ask to get the right answers and get you to where you need to be, which is also why, yes, we are our main focus at Real Food Recovery is helping people get off sugar and processed food. But we have four foundational principles. So it's single ingredient food, it's sleep, it's movement and spirituality. We look at that whole picture. It Food is just part of it, but you've got to get the whole picture going together. All the spokes in the wheel need to be the same length, going the same direction. Otherwise, you're going to have a clunky ride. And so I think the big picture of health is having all those components combined. And then there's several supporting principles that we do too. But food is just part of the recovery process. You've got, unless you can sleep adequately, I don't know if you want to let's just pick on sleep. Unless you can get that sleep portion of your life in check, you're going to have a tough time making big changes to your food. Do you agree with that?
Yes, definitely, definitely. And I think what contributes to that is really knowing where your labs are. Because these days, the doctors, they just don't know. I'm not selling anything. Up on my website, danieltrevor.com, I have blood tests. Check out what they are. You can either buy them there because I made a deal with Quest Diagnostics. You can buy them there, or write them down, take them to your doctor, and say, Doc, I want this. I want this test. But you can find out exactly why you want it, why you need it, because I feel that if you're over 40 and you're not testing on a regular basis, that's like driving down the road without a speedometer or a steering wheel or a check engine light, or you're going to crash, right? So you have to know what's
Mhm.
going on because there's no symptoms, as we discussed earlier. And so you
Mhm.
want to know these certain, but be careful. Let's say you go to my website and you check out these top labs that I recommend. You say, Doc, I'd like to get this. Sometimes, and I was talking about this with Dr. Anthony Chafee, because he knows, he's seen behind the curtains, right? The doctor might say, oh, you don't need that, you're fine. Oh, you don't need
Mhm.
that, you're fine. The only reason they're saying is because they don't know what it is. They wouldn't know how to analyze your results on it anyway. And the last thing that doctors want to get from their patients is homework. They don't want homework from their patients, right?
Yeah.
Because they're already busy enough and they got, like I said, they have the 7 to 10 minutes per patient and maybe it's a little longer somewhere. And again, I'm not bad mouthing all doctors because I'm sure there's a lot more these days that are, I mean, that's where I've learned a lot of this from medical doctors who went through something that I went through and took the deep dive and everything. So um, it's really important that you find out yourself. And that's why I've written the book. I'll show it here.
Oh,
Unholy
nice.
Trinity, How
Yeah.
Carbs, Sugar, and Oils Make Us Fat, Sick, and Addicted, and How to Escape Their Grip, which is very important because as we've been discussing, they are, really hard to escape from. And so I've written for the average reader of health and wellness because I see too many books that the authors just assume that the reader's going to understand this and that and the other. So if I have to use a technical term, let's say endothelial or endothelium, in parentheses right after I'll put lining of the arteries, which is
Good.
very important to know
Good.
about. So that way, after I've done that 2 or 3 times, the reader goes, oh, endothelium, lining of the arteries. That's why when I have this thing and it goes through my whole body, goes to the arteries, that kind of thing. So again, I have a lot of charts and images and that kind of thing. So I really want to make sure that people really get it because I always believe what Einstein said. He said something like, if you can't explain something complicated to a third grader, then you don't really understand it yourself. You have to be able to give examples or, you got to have to be able to break it down. Not that I'm
Yeah.
saying my readers are third graders, but you know what I'm saying? You just got to be able to break it down.
Right. And I love that in your book title that it says how to escape it. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I'm sure everyone's leaning in like, okay, he's got me now, but how do I escape this?
Well, the best tip that I can give, and I've seen people use it successfully, is one we talked a little earlier. You got to make your list of what is it that I can't do without. I can't do without my Reese's Buttercup or
Mm.
Reese's Peanut Cup, right?
Hmm.
So you go to YouTube, and there's a way to make it it tastes just like it,
Yeah.
but it's using healthier. And eventually, you want to get away from that too. But you'll see all of these different things on YouTube, these different recipes, whether it's some kind of a what do they call it, a fat bomb, or to help you make a
Hmm.
transition. I
Hmm.
don't know anybody that made it, cold turkey and just did it like change in one day. So you have to do it little by little.
Hmm.
Progress, not perfection. And that's what I would go for. I would just make your list, take the top 3 or 5 and go, okay, so my mission today is find out a good recipe for this. How do I substitute this out?
I don't know about you. Do you work with people at all?
I
Or
don't.
okay. Usually in our industry, people start out they're super excited and gung ho that first week. The second week, they're like, "Oh, it's getting a little harder." And the third week, they don't want to call you back because they're back into it's hard.
It
Once you're
is.
addicted, it's hard and you're in an environment where you're fighting it. Not only are you fighting the environment, you're fighting everybody that you're involved with is usually on the dope too.
Yeah,
And
no, I
so
understand.
it affects relationships, it's in the workplace. It's literally, I went to the doctor's office to get my annual physical a couple weeks ago, and there's a dish of candy at the check-in at the
Oh,
receptionist,
you are kidding me.
no.
Oh my God.
No, and I almost said something to my doctor, but then, do I want to be that guy? Maybe I should have said something, but I
Oh
was
my
trying to
God.
think of what to say. But when I say it's everywhere, it's everywhere. And I have such compassion for people in that position. So you really, before you make these changes, you've got to decide what's your goal here and understand what it's going to take to change. And also realize it's taken decades to get to where you are today. I think you just said that this a minute ago. This is not, we don't change everything all at once, and it's not going to happen in a week. We're a society of instant gratification as well. So when people see this is going to be tough and it's going to be tough for a little bit, it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. So
Yeah, no,
again, how bad do you want it?
I hear you. Listen, I got slapped around real good by life for what happened to me because I almost died, right? So that's what shook me up was like, oh man, I got 2 daughters. I'm a grandpa now. I mean, I got a lot of stuff that I want to do. So you unless you want to avoid something like that I went through, and heart disease is really rampant in women, and it's even now. I was just reading this study that only 17% of cardiologists know that women die of heart disease more than men. For
Ah,
all it's reversed now. I cover that, and well, a lot of it is about heart disease, and but how we get to all these different diseases, the fatty liver disease, that everything that's going to put on weight, um, and the things that these kind of foods are what's going to raise your blood glucose, which raises your insulin, and insulin is the fat storage hormone. You don't want to have fat building up on your body. You got to eliminate the carbs or bring them down. It's really interesting. There was this book that came out in 1950. Oh my God, it was and it comes out every few years, and it's 16, and we're on our 11th or 12th edition of it now. And it's 16 over 1600 pages. It's
oh,
190 different nutrition experts, and there's a section in it that says it's about the book is called Modern Nutrition in Health and Disease. And they have a section on essential nutrients human essential nutrients. And they list them all out. There's about 50 of them. Starts with water, and then it goes to your aminos and fats and vitamins and trace minerals and all these different things. And they list them out. And then at the very bottom, I'll say, notice the complete absence of carbohydrates. There's none on the essential human nutrients. And then the what do you call it? The National U.S. National Academy of Science, which is one of the top science places on the planet, even they said, I think I have it over here. I have 2 large screens here in front of me. and I think I have that quote here. It says, the lower limit of dietary the lower limit of dietary carbohydrate compatible with life is zero, provided adequate amounts of protein and fat are consumed. The lower limit of dietary carbohydrate compatible with life is zero, provided adequate amounts of protein and fat are consumed. What does that mean? If you have an adequate amount of protein and fat in your body, specifically the liver, can enact this process called gluconeogenesis. Glucose sugar, neo genesis, beginning or birth of. Because if you get low, because we don't want hypoglycemia when we low blood sugar, we want to keep it at the right rate. The liver can do that and give it to the body, provided you have enough animal fat and protein. It's just, look, anthropologists and bioarchaeologists have told us that our diet for millions of years, for at least they've proven at least 2.6 to 4, 2.6 to 4.5 million years. It consisted of what we could catch, kill, and eat, nose to tail. Well, we might pick off a tree or a vine, that kind of thing, but only when those berries were in season, right? So it was always a very high protein and fat, low carbohydrate diet. That's what these bodies are used to for millions of years. And so
Hmm.
that's why we do so bad on these new foods to mankind in the last hundred years or so.
Well, I will admit that I do eat carbs. I eat fruit and some grain like oats or rice, but not in abundance. So what I like to tell people is you have to figure out what works for you.
Exactly.
I because when we get new clients, they're always like, okay, so what's the diet? There is no diet. Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, give me the printout. What am I supposed to eat for breakfast?
The
No, 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 no. It's
printout.
it's single ingredient foods. And from a single ingredient food, something that's not been processed, something that will rot if you wait long enough. We want the sunshine and water to have touched its life cycle in some way. If you stick to single ingredient foods, then from there, I don't care if you're vegan or carnivore, but you've got to figure out in that range what specifically works for you because we're not shoving square pegs into round holes. Because what
I
works
got
for
it.
my body may not work for your body. Because I can have a little bit of fruit and that satiates me and I'm happy and I'm calm. Because I need to do what keeps my brain calm and not activated. So I can have an apple every day or some pineapple or berries and I'm fine and I move on. Now,
Yeah, no,
it
that's so important what you're saying. Um, look, like I said, I got slapped around real good, so I'm more strict on all this stuff than other people are. When I go
I
out to a steakhouse with my daughters, I said, look, I've told them a long time ago, I said, look, I'm not the food police. Just eat what you want. They're pretty good on their diet anyway, but they're not into the whole processed food. They're smart girls. But I'm never going to be food police, but because I've learned from what works for me, and I just try to apply. See, the native state for these humanoid bodies that we have is a state of ketosis, where it was a higher fat and protein, lower carbohydrates. Now, if
mm-hmm.
you want to get some carbs from, like you're saying, whole foods, some blueberries, that kind of thing, um, great, that's fine. And as long as you're keeping an eye on your fasting blood glucose and your A1C. And here's another thing that doctors miss, and it's another shocking statistic. 74, there was another study out of Johns Hopkins. They found that 74 to 4% of doctors, general practitioners, family physicians, internists, and cardiologists, 74% do not know how to properly diagnose or test for prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. I'm saying, what? Are you kidding me? That's our biggest epidemic. What they'll do is they'll test fasting blood glucose and A1C. And if you just do those two, you're not going to know. Because even the American Diabetes Association, even they say, hey, if you're going to do those two, you're going to miss a lot of people. What they don't do
Mm-hmm.
is they never test the insulin. And there's a
Mm-hmm.
test called the oral glucose tolerance test with insulin, OGTT with insulin. And that's the one where I discovered I was a raging type 2 diabetic and I didn't
Oh
know it.
wow.
And
Oh
that was
wow.
this that was the source root. So there's 1% of the population that could be on the slim side and still be a diabetic, and that was me. and it was from all the grains and that kind of thing. Thinking that a fruit smoothie in the morning is good for me. It's what? You know how, like a big glass of orange juice, that is going
Yeah.
to raise your blood sugar sky high. And so anyway, I had all the wrong information. I thought I was doing well, but I was a type 2 diabetic. And once I did this oral glucose tolerance test with insulin, man, oh man, I described that up on the website too, when you click on the blood test. So get that one because that will verify where you are on the diabetic spectrum. Because, see, having some degree of a diabetic physiology is the source root cause of all these other major diseases. That's the first chart that I have in chapter 1.
Yeah.
In the middle, I have
Yeah.
hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance, which very soon lead
Hmm.
into prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And then it's pointing out to all of these things: heart attacks, strokes, cancers, PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which I have a whole chapter on how to reverse it in 12 weeks,
Oh, wow.
um, cataracts and blindness, Alzheimer's. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. Diabetic neuropathy with the tingling in the fingers and the hand and the feet,
Hmm.
that kind of thing, which lead to amputations. Oh my
Yeah.
God, Paige, listen to this new stat. I just found this a couple of months ago. In the United States, the average amount of amputations is up to 438 per day. They're chopping off the toes and the feet and everything. It's so sad because it's so avoidable.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
really is, having some degree of a diabetic physiology is where all of these new diseases of modernity, of modern life, start.
I do not disagree with you on that at all. It's scary. It's an epidemic and now spilling over to our children. I
Ooh,
mean, we're raising little diabetics. It's
it's
just sickening. It
yeah.
makes me, it's devastating, really. And you were talking about lab tests and how doctors won't order something that you might want. I don't know where, you don't have to tell me where you live, but I live in Wichita, Kansas, and I know there's a couple of places that you can just pay cash and get a lab done if you are really wanting a specific lab. I think you can't. There are places, and I think Quest is. You mentioned Quest. I
Well, yeah,
think they are
yeah. I
one
have course
place.
that's on my website. You can either order it there. Again, this is not a money motivated mission for me. I just
Yeah,
want
yeah, yeah.
people, to get better, and I want to share the information. Um, and so, yeah, you can go there. You can order them there or write them down. Quest has thousands of locations all over the United States.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
just put in Quest Lab near me,
Mm-hmm.
and you got one down the street or, within
Mm-hmm.
a couple of miles. And
Mm-hmm.
then LabCorp is another one that has thousands of
Yes. Yeah,
locations.
we
So,
have that too.
yeah,
And
so you could do that.
it's not that expensive.
No.
Not bad
Oral
at all.
glucose tolerance test, I think it's like $89 or something. But it's really a very, very important one.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've taken up too much of your time and I appreciate that and I want to be respectful. But if you were on your deathbed and had to give one piece of advice to the world, what would it be?
Oh my God, I guess don't be like me. Find out what's going on inside you with the proper testing. Find a good functional medicine doctor. Go to your website. Just watch out for these modern foods that's where all the money's made, and you don't want to
Mhm.
become a victim of all that. And yeah, you just got to get the information so you know
I
yourself.
agree.
You go, okay, so am I going to reach for that pizza? So, because again, your taste buds and your palate will change over time. Just
Agree.
go for progress, not perfection, and just keep at it. And pretty soon you won't even have those cravings anymore.
Agree. I
Yeah.
agree. That I do promise you that your taste buds do change and your cravings for sugar, they dissipate. I mean, th- you still will have them, but it's a 3 versus a 10 or
Oh,
a
yeah.
12.
I know, but
So,
you get to a point where, like I have, if I put a teaspoon of, or just 5 or 6 blueberries on my tongue, break them up and swish them around, that's like where I am now is like eating a Hershey's bar, right? So
mm-hmm,
I'm good. And I have a little bit of
mm-hmm.
that with my, this yogurt that I told you about at night. But anyway, so yeah, just you got to get the knowledge of what is making your blood glucose go up, which raises your insulin, and then which will lead to all of the diseases of modern life.
I agree. And don't you think at some point you may feel fine today, but at some point the piper always has to be paid and you'll never have enough money and it will never be a convenient time when he shows up.
It's true. I agree with that. Thank you, Paige. Yes, it's been wonderful.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate your wisdom and your time, the time you took to be with us. And is the best place to find you on your website that you
Yeah, that's
mentioned?
it, danieltrevor.com. And what I do is I have a weekly newsletter that I send out, and it's not
Okay.
very long. It's just a lot of the topics that are in the book, but are more bite-sized, right?
Yeah,
Sign up there, you get a free preview of the book, which is the first 48 pages. It's a PDF. And, if you like it, you can go get it. If not, then, that kind of thing. So, danieltrevor.com. I got a lot of great information up there, videos and information about the blood labs and so forth. So,
perfect.
check it out. And yeah, so thanks a lot, Paige. I really
Yeah.
appreciate having you. You're asking me all the right questions
Oh,
too.
good. Well, because I do my homework. And I will have your website listed in the show notes for
Okay,
people
great.
to easily get to. And if you all want to find out more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. And our book, Real Food Recovery, If Food Isn't the Answer, What's the Question, is up on Amazon today. Thanks so much, guys. See you next time. Bye bye.